everybody. It's really lovely to have you back to our Talented Woman series. And today we are discussing how to retain top talent. It's one of the employers' bugbears at the moment is how do we retain top talent? And we are talking to Natasha Netha of MFS Africa. And our topic today is employee engagement and satisfaction. So Natasha, thank you for joining me today. It's so lovely to have you. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion this morning. But please, would you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Great. Thank you so much, Philippa, and for this opportunity. I've been following the work that Recruit My Mom has been doing over the years. And alongside you as women in this space, trying to make a meaningful impact. By way of introduction, as you mentioned, I am with MFS Africa, and we are a digital payments business that has a regional focus predominantly on the continent, but also with some partners that sit in Europe and the US as well as Asia. And I am currently in the role of Employee Experience Director. I'm specifically covering Southern and East Africa. And it's a bit of a mouthful, but in a nutshell, given the nature of our business, what is really important for us is ensuring that we create a workplace where people can thrive, because how we deliver to our end partners is really dependent on making sure that people are operating at their full potential. So it's a really exciting space. Thank you once again for the opportunity to engage on this topic that, we're also trying to figure out as we go along. There are things we know and certainly things we don't.
Thanks, Natasha. And it's been wonderful to be watching how MFS Africa has scaled over the years, from a Recruit My Mom, just watching you as a company. And so I can't think of anybody better to discuss this topic of engagement. And so, Natasha, I want to ask you, how would you define employee engagement and why do you think it's so important?
Great. I'll kick off by saying a lot of what I share has been off the back of many informal conversations, as well as some of my own research. So I'll probably be consolidating a lot of the thoughts that I've come across, and certainly, my voice is intertwined in what I'll share as well. But for me, employee engagement, if you are to look at, I guess, a textbook definition, describes the effort that an employee is going to direct towards their job. And what's critical for any employer, in my view, is to answer two fundamental questions when it comes to whether or not an employee is going to choose to direct their efforts towards the job. And the first is bringing about an understanding in the employee's mind as to why the company exists. And that reason for the company's existence needs to be something meaningful that aligns with the employee. And certainly when we look to bring people into our business, we spend quite a lot of time walking through our journey as a company, where we started, where we are, how we think about the space that we operate in as we look ahead. And by the end of the process, we want people to really understand that in a tangible way. And when they join us, that is the assumption that what we have communicated by way of our story is something that they resonate with. And then the second question is the work that I'm doing something that matters? And you'll hear, for the first time in kind of the history of work, we have this multi-generational workplace. And I know that we often quote the millennials as those individuals that ask that question more often than not. But I think it's something that, whether you choose to openly ask it or not, is important to reconcile within yourself. And so it talks to impact. So as a business, we look to make a meaningful impact when it comes to financial inclusion and being able to participate in the economy. But for an employee, that's what's really important, that they understand how their work matters and why it matters under that kind of overall umbrella of why the company exists. So ultimately, in a nutshell, it's about being part of an organization whose purpose resonates with you, and that you can see how what you do on a daily basis will make an impact.
I like that. How does my work matter? That's quite an important question for employers to think about for their employees as well. So, Natasha, we just chatted a little bit about engagement. Let's talk about job satisfaction. Is
Mm.
it different to engagement, or is it the same thing? Are they two sides of the same coin? And how does that matter in an employee's world?
Yeah, so definitely it is something that matters to the employee and therefore should matter to companies and organizations. It is really difficult to untangle these two concepts because as you start doing research, you'll find a lot of sort of interconnectedness between some of the things that describe and talk about engagement as well as satisfaction. But engagement is about me, and I kind of framed it with my response to your earlier question. But I think satisfaction is about what the employer is willing to offer and how I respond to that offering. You'll hear a lot of talk around employee value proposition, and it basically answers the question for the employee, what's in it for me? And is what you said you will reward me, provide me as I walk the journey within your business, actually what my experience is. So engagement is about, do I actually want to be in this environment, and the extent to which I will show up because of the alignment of that environment to what I think is important. But satisfaction is then, what's in it for me? If I give 110%, what am I going to get in return? And, you can look at tangible as well as intangible things. And I think what is really important to understand for companies, because when you look to address things around satisfaction, there are so many things out there that you can consider. And so on this particular point around satisfaction, I would say to organizations that context matters. How you will be able to address employee satisfaction as a fledgling family-run business that has been operating for a couple of years versus, a listed entity with thousands of employees globally will be quite different. But that is how the two are sort of somewhat different, and it is important. And there's a whole host of research around why, which we can certainly unpack.
I like the way you frame the context of the organizations, because you're right. So many times an employee could be working for a small, as you say, family-owned organization versus a multi-global, multinational corporate, and that level of satisfaction could be quite different in terms of offerings. Let's just maybe address for the smaller organizations rather than the big corporates. How would an employer possibly go about assessing their employees' satisfaction levels? How do you have any recommendations for them on how you would recommend them start doing that?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things are important before you embark on this journey. I think once you put out there to employees that you are wanting to solicit their view on how satisfied they are, that it's not just asking the question, but as they then give you feedback, that there's actually a willingness to do something about what you're hearing. So that then for me falls within the scope of commitment. So before you even engage employees, I think it's important to understand the commitment levels. If what they share with you is something they expect, have a reasonable expectation that you will address in a way that kind of addresses it, maybe, not holistically, but that there are some sort of efforts to get to, a future state that they desire. So I think commitment from the employer is really important. And then I would say, depending on the time that you have and the resources that you want to put into it, there are a lot of different ways that you can look at this. But if we look at kind of your smaller organizations, so in my mind, that would be an organization of, up to 50 employees. So it could be 10, 12, 38. I would say you have the opportunity to really understand individuals on a one-on-one basis in a way that you wouldn't in a larger organization. And so I think right from the start of the process where you are bringing people into your organization, start to engage them in a way where what you're trying to do is to actually understand who Natasha is, who Philippa is, behind the CV, behind the skills and experience, what motivates them, what excites them, what do they enjoy, what are they good at, what are they not good at. and then taking that kind of intel and crafting, where possible, something that is unique to them by way of some of the benefits that you would offer. And what you will find, I think, even as I'm kind of describing this approach, a company may think, well, I don't have the time to speak to all my employees. But what you will find is by the fifth or sixth conversation, it's pretty similar feedback. So if you haven't had the opportunity as you recruit individuals, you could then select a focus group internally that is representative of your employee demographics and engage those individuals. And you will, in a smaller company, kind of know who the individuals are that tend to be the voice of the employees. Even if they aren't speaking in first person, they will kind of come to you with a couple of things they've heard other employees talking about that they want to present to you as something to look at within the space of satisfaction. So the approach in terms of how you get to understand what is important to employees is just to have conversations and to start those sooner rather than earlier. And it can be from a water cooler conversation to something a little bit more sophisticated, like a survey where you could choose to make it, anonymous or not. Managers who have one-on-one conversations as they talk about performance with their employees also have an opportunity to distill some of the things that may be meaningful for employees to consider around satisfaction. So you have a lot. It's about commitment, time, and resources in my mind as to what you actually go with.
I think that's such a great answer. And you reiterated it's about conversations, and I'm hearing there's an intent. So that I think is really important there as well. So thank you. Natasha, can you give us some examples of employee engagement or satisfaction tools that you may have implemented in the organization in which you've either previously worked or currently at MFS Africa that you have seen have worked really well?
Yeah, so I think anonymous surveys, just because you probably will get people to be more honest than if you were to not make surveys anonymous, are really powerful. I think one thing to bear in mind, however, is don't just send out a survey. Do the work around framing what the intent is with the information that you will get and how you then will act on that information. So that kind of internal communication plan before you just send out a survey will really set you up for success. So those have been really important. I touched on it before, but maybe to unpack a little bit, we in our organization expect managers to have meaningful engagements with their employees, not just to talk around, what are your goals and what are the tasks that will get you to your goals, but how are you doing as within the organization from a professional standpoint, and kind of getting to some of the things that are somewhat below the surface. And managers have the flexibility to choose the cadence of those one-on-ones. But we say, at least once a month, really understand where someone who reports to you is at beyond just delivering in the role. So that human connection, and like you said, being intentional about it, where people know I've got, kind of once a month an opportunity to chat to my manager. I need to come into that discussion prepared. They will come with specific things that are either of concern or something that they want to really kind of recognize their manager, someone in another team on, which you then can share amongst managers as something to continue doing as an organization because of the impact it's having to employees. So yeah, I would say surveys for any organization, and because you can get free survey tools as well, there's not necessarily resource constraint there, but your one-on-one human connection type of conversations I also have found to be quite meaningful. And I know we're talking all things talent retention, but when people do choose to leave an organization, that can also be a valuable opportunity to understand their reasons for leaving, what they feel the company did really well and how it can improve, And that would be, your traditional exit interview. So lots of different approaches. And I think even with the manager conversations, equipping your managers to be able to navigate those conversations. Within our organization, we've been quite intentional around framing those conversations in a way that is balanced. So what is not working and what is working well versus, just being an opportunity to complain without, necessarily wanting to take the charge to figure out solutions that will address some of your complaints. So equipping managers so that those conversations sort of proceed in the way that you intend is also quite important.
I do like the way you answered things in a very balanced way, both from the manager's point of view and the employee's point of view, Natasha. So I can see you definitely have been in experience management for a while, managing people. The final question I wanted to ask as we close up this discussion is, do you have any other tips or thoughts around employee engagement? If this is, because we obviously recognize that this is an important part of employee retention. So do you have any tips for employers on engagement or satisfaction that you would like to leave as we close up our discussion today?
Wow, how much time do I have? But no, I will try and leave you with just a few thoughts. So I think I mentioned it before, but I would say, stay close to your people. We often put on managers, particularly in the case of someone resigning, the question that we ask is, are you surprised? And if a manager is completely blindsided, then that's the first indication that proximity to your employees is not where it should be. And again, context is really important. We've had some managers who have been brought on as managers in the business and, potentially are managing teams of people who've been with the company for a longer period of time. So context is important, but that tends to be a very easy measure that you can, frame in the way of that question. So the first thing I would say is stay close to your people and to watch what they say, how they behave, and what they don't say potentially, and be able to engage individuals where, you see certain behaviors that, maybe speak to them disengaging, and to have that conversation in a proactive way, I think is really important. The second thing is, I would say, start how you mean to end. And by that, you want to have the right foundation that you build on versus every year you are kind of withdrawing certain things and adding certain things. From the employee's perspective, what keeps individuals, if we look at this idea around engagement and satisfaction, is trust. They believe that an organization will do what they say and will continue to do that. Of course, unless there's something, within an industry or the macroeconomic environment that means that certain things need to be withdrawn. But employees, even just thinking of yourself as an employee, right? You work 30 days hoping and having a very clear and firm expectation that you'll get paid at the end of the month, but you kind of get paid in arrears, having delivered or honored the provision of your services upfront. So I think trust is really important, but rather build things in a sustainable way than try and do everything, in a 12 to 24 month period, only to realize that it's not sustainable and take those things away from employees. And as you craft some of these sort of tools or, very tangible benefits that you can offer that, drive specifically satisfaction, to ask employees, again, staying close to your people, what is meaningful for your employees, what kind of individuals do you hire, and therefore what is something that they would want versus the company next door. And so whether it's a birthday bonus, whether it's gym membership, whether it's, meals at a kind of cafeteria, whether there's a very tangible way that you celebrate wins as a team, start how you mean to end and build that up over time, because employees will look at what you do rather than what you say. And I often, hear these conversations around values. We have these amazing values on the wall, and yeah, it would be great if people actually live them out. It's not just about having values, for example, on a wall, which drive engagement, but are people living those values out on a day-to-day basis? And then, the third thing I would say is, be a lifelong learner. As an employee, as an employer, don't ever assume that you now know everything and then become complacent. I think you have to, again, within the context of your particular organization, assume that if you have great talent, somebody else has recognized that great talent, and to stay ahead of the conversation with employees around, the various things that you're offering, what is meaningful for them, etc. And so I think if you do those three things, staying close to your people, being consistent in how you deliver some of the benefits around, beyond just the salary side of things. And then also just being a lifelong learner and, knowing what you don't know and engaging employees throughout their journey, then that definitely will set you up as an organization. But I think, as with everything, there will always be that 2% who, despite your best efforts, over time you realize that it's not the best fit. And I think even within those more difficult conversations, to identify where you see that and to address it. And sometimes it may result in you parting ways. But somebody who is disengaged and not satisfied can actually start to impact those who are. So, look at the 99, but also be cognizant of the one.
Absolutely. Such great advice. Today I've been talking to Natasha Netha of MFS Africa, the Employee Experience Director. And Natasha, thank you for sharing such valuable insights from your, just your working knowledge of working with so many people and having seen the business scale the way you've scaled, your business has been scaling. So I wanted to thank you for sharing today and for your time. It's been, as always, such a joy speaking to you. And I wish you and MFS Africa every success in the coming years as well. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Philippa. Much appreciated, and all the best to recruit my mom as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Natasha.